When you're heading to the lake and facing pre-spawn smallmouth conditions, it's either going to be really, really good or it could be super, super tough. I didn't know what to expect on this day, but got to the lake, saw 55-degree water temps in the morning, talked to a couple people at the dock, and they said a couple days before that, they saw some of the first smallmouth starting to build beds. I've known from past history on some of these lakes that that can make for a really tough bite. Once they have their beds done, they start to bite. Once they're spawning, you can get almost any smallmouth to bite. But there's that few days when they're building where it can be extremely tough. There was already a light breeze and the forecast had 15 to 20 mile an hour gusts. Well, let's just say by mid to late morning, those gusts were higher than that. And by 1 o'clock, gusts up to 45 miles an hour and kicking out of the northwest. The first spot I'm heading to is a small flat, 5 to 7 feet deep, and there's a line of rocks coming off a point. It's thicker rock in the middle. It's got a few sporadic bigger rocks on the edge where the sand is, and that's the setup I love. If it's all just rock, it doesn't seem like it holds as many. But if there's some openings in there, those fish just like to cruise around there. This is an excellent transition zone for those fish that are starting to look for bedding areas and also just to cruise around those flats looking for food. Right off the edge of the rocks, it drops into that 12 to 18 feet of water. So everything about this spot is just good. It also had this light ripple blowing over it. So I pulled up to it, put the talons down, and just let the boat sit dead still and let me look at my electronics. And that 360 showed me a perfect picture of those rocks so I could just dissect it cast after cast. The conditions were totally calling for a jerkbait bite to start the morning. I picked up my rod with that 110 perch on it and started casting. In the first couple casts, I noticed right away something wasn't right. On the electronics, I could see fish following my jerkbait, and I mixed up the pauses and how long I was waiting, and it didn't matter. They'd follow it, they wouldn't bite. So I put the jerkbait down and picked up that new Megabass Z2 crankbait. It dives 9 to 10 feet. It's a little 2-inch crankbait, and I thought, smaller presentation, it gets right down in their face, maybe that'll work. Made a couple casts with that, and I noticed the exact same thing. Fish were following it, they're around, but they weren't biting it. Seeing that was enough to put it down and grab the drop shot rod. Rigged it with a 12 to 15 inch leader, a 3-inch Hayes Dong shad, and just cast it on those rocks, and just basically once I felt the rocks, shook it. I caught some fish on there, but then it slowed down on that too. The drop shot bite slowed down really quick, so I put that rod down, grabbed my Megabass Destroyer Flissa rod. I had a 1/16 ounce Okashira screw head on it, small little jig. That 16th ounce is not big. It's got a 3/0 hook, super sharp, and then it's got that little spinner on it. And there's times where that little thing's spinning, even on a slow retrieve, makes those fish go nuts. I put a 3-inch Hayes Dong shad on the back and fired it out. First cast, I let it hit the bottom, and it takes a while. That's a really light bait. And I was casting about 8 feet of water. When my line went slack, I just tightened down, started reeling super, super slow to keep that bait down by the rocks. First cast, a fish hammers it, and I fight him into the boat. And I'm thinking, okay, was that fluke first cast, or are we on to something? So I got back up on the front deck, looked at the 360, can still see the exact lay of the rocks, fire out a cast, same spot, let it hit the bottom, slowly start reeling it in, something stops it again. This is a really nice fish. add them to the boat, and start thinking, okay, 2 casts in a row, that could mean something. So I get rigged up again, throw it out, let it hit the bottom, start reeling, and wouldn't you know, the rod loads up for a 3rd time in a row, and another nice smallmouth bass. 3 casts in a row on that Okashira screwhead. It's been a really tough bite, and I think I finally found the bait that they're gonna destroy. Another big brown fish. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, look at that. Another one. You can see the little blade there. That just spins real slow when you're reeling it in along the bottom. Little bait, big fish. A lot of this resulted because my electronics right away showed me that the fish were not interested in those moving baits, even with a pause. So it forced me to keep changing, trying to find something that the fish were gonna bite. If I didn't have the electronics and I kept casting that jerk bait and they weren't biting it, I could have easily just packed up and moved because I have like 15 spots to fish on this lake. And a lot of times I like to run and gun until I find the active fish. Well, I was sitting on active fish if you put the right bait in front of their face. After catching a half dozen more nice fish on the Okashira screwhead, changed colors up a little bit on that haze dong shad. Another one on that. The wind picked up a little and the bites started to slow down. So I started moving spots, and it was tough. After about 3 spots, I pulled into a mini little rock pile, and it was about the size of the front deck of my boat. And I'm fishing it with that screwhead. And all of a sudden I glanced down at my side imaging, and I see a fish shadow shaped like a fish, and it's heading towards the back of the boat off my left side. I reel in quick, grab my drop shot rod, and just pitch it towards the back of the boat. And I work it. And not long after I casted, my rod doubles over. Fight a beautiful, thick brown fish to the boat, net it, and it's a 5 1/4 pound smallmouth. That fish was 100% from my electronics, because there's no way at that time I would have turned around and fired a cast behind my boat when the rock pile that I was fishing with no other structure around me was in front of my boat. This beautiful fish hit a drop shot with about a 12 to 15 inch leader and that 3-inch haze dong shad on it. It's super easy getting stuck in that rut where you go to the lake and you have in your mind what you're gonna catch them on that day or how you're gonna start your day. And today just proved how much of an open mind you need to keep Because if I would have kept forcing those fish, that jerk bait or the crankbait, I might have caught fish. I would have kept casting and casting or moving spots. But I saw fish around me. They weren't reacting to it. So I kept switching the presentation until I found one that worked. So you can see how a jerk bait, you cast a couple times, nothing touches it. You pick up a little screw head jig with a 3-inch minnow on it and 3 casts in a row, plus a bunch of fish after that, all in the exact same spot. Nothing changed. It was just finding the proper bait that the fish wanted at that time. On a tough bite, never stop mixing up your lures, the size, the colors, the presentation, until you start to get some bites and put some clues together and really narrow it down and hone in on it. Doing this can make you go from catching a few fish a day to absolutely loading the boat just because you put the time in to keep changing. The next time you're on the water, you're around fish and they're not biting very good, I highly recommend picking up a small little 1/16 ounce screw head, putting a 3-inch Hazdong shad on the back, and fishing it extremely slow. Small baits don't just catch small fish, they put a lot of big fish in the boat too.